Hey everyone, all two of you that follow me on Facebook. I am in Gettysburg right now. I'm about to walk Pickett's charge. This is the Virginia Monument, about where 15,000 Confederate soldiers started marching across the battlefield. That's Robert E. Lee on top. All those other dudes represent all the different classes of workers in Virginia, except of course the slaves. It was July 3rd, 1863, third day of the battle. Walking east right now from Seminary Ridge. The battle started July 1st, 1863. It started over here on my left, north and west of the town of Gettysburg. On that day, Confederates came in and pushed the Union soldiers off of Seminary Ridge, east through town, where the Union set up their line on Cemetery Ridge. It's called Seminary Ridge because the Lutheran Seminary is up there. The other one's called Cemetery Ridge because the cemetery is up there. The second day of the battle, the Union line extended the left on my right. You can't see it through the woods. Little Round Top, all the way across to the north to Culp's Hill. The plan on July 2nd was for the Confederates to attack both ends of the Union line at the same time. They did attack both ends, but not at the same time. General Meade on the Union was able to send reinforcements back and forth as needed. So on the third day of the battle, Robert E. Lee decided to hit the Union in the center. He figured they would be the weakest there, since he figured Meade would reinforce both ends, expecting another attack on either end, or both. That was not the case. Meade figured Lee would try to hit the center since he tried to hit both flanks the day before, and he turned out to be right. So Pickett's charge was 12,000 to 15,000 Confederates moving east across like a mile of open field, coming out of the woods behind me here, moving towards Cemetery Ridge. Before they started, there was maybe an hour of artillery. They just fired their cannons out of the woods, over the field, into the Union lines, hoping to soften them up a little bit. And unfortunately for them, that didn't work. What happened was a lot of their fuses weren't set for the right time. Either they were cut too short or cut too long. It was a manufacturing problem in Richmond. And a lot of the shells exploded behind the Union lines, which is where the hospital was. So this went on for a while. If you look over here, you can see Little Round Top there. That's where the Union left flank was. Supposedly the cannons were so loud you could hear the firing all the way from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. I wasn't there, so I don't know if that's true. But these guys marched in 3 columns across the field here. Wide open. This would have been farm fields back then. Early July, so whatever crops they were growing, corn, wheat, it wouldn't have been that tall. So the Union soldiers on the other side of this little rise here, they would have had a good view once the Confederates came over. And they waited. And they waited. was hot in July of 1863, and these guys would have been wearing their wool coats and their wool shirts and their wool pants. But most of them had hats on to keep the sun off their faces. A lot of them were probably barefoot. Disappointed in barefoot because I guess there was a rumor that there was a shoe factory in Gettysburg. I'm like, alright, we're going to get some shoes. No shoe factory. They managed to get some horses from the locals, some food. Most of the people in town knew that the army was coming. They weren't necessarily sure that there was going to be a battle coming here, but there were Confederates in the area for a couple days ahead of the battle. We're just a few miles north of Maryland. Maryland is a slave state, and there was a sizable free black population living in town here. Naturally, those folks were scared. Guys coming up from the south. They're thinking, oh, they're going to capture me, they're going to take me back down south. Maybe put me back in slavery, or they never were a slave to begin with. Doesn't matter. You're black, you're going south, you're going to be a slave. So a lot of them left town. A lot of the white people left town. Hide their valuables or take them with. Get as far away from the armies as they could. A lot of people didn't leave. A lot of folks stayed here. They hid in their basements during the battle or got out of town while they had a chance during a lull in the fighting. Anyone who didn't take advantage of the time before the battle to move their horses out of town somewhere probably lost their horse. Both armies need horses, either for the cavalry to ride, the officers, pull the wagons, pull artillery. Worst case scenario, food. The Confederates had a harder time getting horses than the Union soldiers did. The American government had better ways of sourcing horses, larger area in the north, lots of actual currency they could pay people with. In the south, they were more poor, a lot of paper money, which was losing value every day. Nobody wanted to sell anything for money that isn't going to be worth as much tomorrow as it is today. A lot of the people at home needed their horses for the farm, so they're harder to come by down south. So anytime they got a chance to steal a horse from up north, they took it. That little dome there in the middle, that's the Pennsylvania Monument. It's one of the farmhouses here. There's cars going by on the Emmitsburg Road. We're going to have to cross that road. Over here, I don't know if you can see the little markers there, that is not the cemetery. We're coming up on Cemetery Hill, but that's not the cemetery, that's just markers on the battlefield. I did this walk once before, but it was years ago. I'm just following the trail, trying to get to the point of reference that they were using in 1863, because the Confederates were focused on what we call the copse of trees. There are still trees there. It's not the original trees from 1863. And this would have been just ahead of the the Union battle line. Just give everyone a general reference point of where they're trying to punch through. You're obviously not going to get 15,000 guys all to hit one spot at the same time. And once these Confederate soldiers got close enough, the Union soldiers started firing their cannons. They had solid shot, which is a round iron ball. Just aim it kind of low so it comes in, hits the ground, just bounces through and knocks people over, knocks off arms, knocks off legs, knocks off heads. They had exploding shot, which they would aim higher, like the Confederates did before they started the charge. The Union fuses were a little more accurate, and what you were trying to do is shoot these cannonballs over the heads of the soldiers. They explode, and iron shrapnel all over the place. And then they also had canister and grape shot, which basically is like turning your cannons into a giant shotgun. And it's, once you get to close range, it just shreds people. Pretty messy. I can't see my copse of trees. I'm not sure where we're going here. I'm just following the trail. You can see this nice farmhouse here. Lots of prosperous farms in Gettysburg in 1863. Start heading towards the fence here and see if I can get through somewhere so I can cross the road. The weather's a lot nicer today than it was the last time I was here. It was back in January. It's about 30 degrees. The sun was shining. It was cold. But the sun made it nice and warm in my car, so I actually had to run the air conditioner and keep the windows down a little bit. Grasshoppers all over the place here. It's that time of year. Happy boys. Fruit trees here in the yard. I hope I'm not fenced in because I don't have to climb over anything. I don't see an opening in the fence. It might be a little while before we can cross the road. Yeah, my friend was out yesterday driving and she saw a chicken crossing the road. And I asked her, "Did you stop and ask why it was crossing?" She said, "No, I almost hit it." Like, well, you had the perfect opportunity to solve the riddle once and for all. You blew it. So, I don't talk to her anymore. Here's that farm. The barn. Very prominent landmark on the battlefield here. The fruit trees. I'm not sure what kind of trees. Probably apple. Some kind of trap or repellent hanging on the trees there. And get rid of the invasive insects, Japanese beetles or stink bugs, spotted lanternflies. There's the barn. This is the house. The Corduroy house, or Corduroy, I don't know how you say his name, but the family is still in town here. They make cemetery tombstones. It's nice to see some of the old names from 1863 still floating around in 2021. Meanwhile, I'm still stuck on the wrong side of the fence. Got to be an opening somewhere. I've done this before. I'll do it again. There's the copse of trees that the Confederates were aiming for. Back in 1863, this fence wouldn't have been a problem. Apple trees. You can see the apples on the older, more mature trees. The fence wouldn't be a problem in 1863 because the soldiers would have just torn it down, thrown it aside. I'm not even sure that the fence was here by the third day of the battle, either being shot to pieces or guys coming out and collecting it for firewood, cook their meals, because it wasn't like today where the commissary wagon just pulls up with a hot meal for you. They had to cook their own. A nice cornfield going here. That wouldn't have been that tall in September. If I can't get through this fence, we're just going to stop here and that'll be it. I might see an opening up ahead though. I see one on the other side of the road. And in 1863, they wouldn't have made all these bizarre left and right turns like I did today, because they just would have marched right across to their destination, run over what's in front of them. They didn't care. It was kill or be killed. And I don't want to die. Trying to avoid any obstacles because that's just who I am. I don't think the Park Service wants me running through their cornfields. There's a trail that leads to somewhere that I could have come through. I see an opening in the fence here. And typically, in the Civil War, the officers would be on horseback. So they're easier for their soldiers to find. And so if they need to move from one part of the battlefield to another, they can do it more quickly. They didn't do that during Pickett's charge because they would be too easy of a target. So the generals were on foot, just like the lowest private would have been. I see a horse-drawn carriage up there on the hill, going up the road. There's our copse of trees. One of the Confederate generals killed here was Lewis Armistead from Virginia. His uncle was the commander at Fort McHenry during the War of 1812. And his wife was with him at the fort during the battle there when the British were coming. He sent his wife and baby away from the battle into the country, and they wound up staying here in Gettysburg, where his nephew would come to die 50 years later. Armistead on foot with his hat on, his sword, leading his Virginians across the battlefield, hoping that he wouldn't have to fight against his best friend Winfield Scott Hancock from Pennsylvania. And supposedly he said, if I ever have to raise my sword against you, may God strike me dead. It wasn't God that struck him dead, it was a Yankee bullet that did it. He didn't die right away. He was injured up here, just beyond the copse of trees. The Confederates actually almost broke through the Union line. They captured some of those cannons, but there were too many Union soldiers in the center, and they couldn't break through. Armistead and Hancock were both wounded, not far from each other. Hancock survived his wounds, later ran for president. You never heard of him, so he was never elected president. He lost the election, but he tried. Armistead died in a farmhouse a couple days later. Take a look back where we came from. You can see South Mountain back there in the distance. If you know anything about the Battle of Antietam, you know about South Mountain. There's the tree line where we came from. Going up Cemetery Hill now. The Union had the advantage here because they had the high ground. Pretty sure General Meade did not say this fight is over. Generally, I have the high ground. And Pickett and 15,000 guys say, "You underestimate my power." And then Meade says, "Don't try it." That's actually Star Wars, not Civil Wars. So we'll come up to the Union line in a minute here.
It was an executive order, and it was a military measure, because if you read it carefully, it didn't free a single person. It only applied to those areas not under the jurisdiction of the Union, not only the Union states, but areas...
Lots of rocks here. I'll stick to the trail. I don't think they want me climbing over their little stone wall. Which is not how Stonewall Jackson got his name. He was dead a couple of months by the time we got to this battle. Stonewall Jackson was Robert E. Lee's right-hand man, killed by friendly fire in Virginia back in May of 1863, Battle of Chancellorsville. A lot of people think if Stonewall was alive, the South would have won this battle, and if they would have won this battle, they would have won the Civil War. Who knows? Longstreet, who I guess was Lee's left-hand man, was in favor of trying to outflank the Union that day instead of just hitting them on the ends of the lines and then hitting them in the middle. He was against Pickett's charge, but he had his orders, so he did it. Some really tall grass here. Yeah, if the Confederates would have outflanked the Union instead of fighting and going around the end, who knows what would have happened. They would have been between the Union Army and pretty much everything. They could go to New York, they could go to Philadelphia, they could take Washington. But nobody knows why Lee did what he did that day. I'm actually moving away from the copse of trees that the Confederates were trying to get to. Just following the trail. Get out of there, turn around and go back the way we need to. For the road here. Little White House up there is the Bryan barn. The Bryan family was free blacks. They left in a hurry. The statue here is General Meade. He was the Union commander that day. He'd only been the Union commander for a couple of days. While the army was marching from Virginia into Pennsylvania, he received orders in the middle of the night, "Wake up, you're in charge of the army now." And it was an offer he couldn't refuse. Lincoln was tired of generals who would lose a battle, turn around and go back to Washington, regroup, try again, lose another battle, turn around and go back to Washington. And Meade was a little different. He won the battle. He did turn around and go back towards Washington, only because that's where the Confederates were going. And it doesn't make sense to sit here and do nothing while Robert E. Lee gets away. He didn't pursue aggressively enough, in my opinion. But on the other hand, there were massive casualties after 3 days of fighting here that needed to be taken care of. Both armies completely exhausted. Some artillery caissons here. So on the one hand, I can understand why he didn't pursue more aggressively, but on the other hand, he had an opportunity to trap Lee's army up against the Potomac River. So on the 4th of July, they had thunderstorms, rain, and flooding. Rather than pursuing a full-on battle, he basically just nipped at Lee's heels, and while Lincoln was glad that Meade won the battle here, possibly saved the North, he was a little upset that he didn't take full advantage and finish the deal. This is what we call the high water mark of the Confederacy. This is their high point of the battle. There's the copse of trees. Inside that nice little wrought iron fence. This is the closest the Confederates came to winning the battle. And you can't see the seminary from here. Alright, well, that'll be it. Maybe I'll have another video for you later. Bye.